Hey, it's Cody. Today I've got a book review of Raven Grimossy's Old World Witchcraft, Ancient Ways for Modern Days. So, uh, really quick, I don't know if you could hear that or not. This video comes with a piggy warning. That just means when it's cold, I can't film where I normally do. So I end up in a room that my pet pig's bedroom is connected to. They like to argue over like bed space and stuff. So if you hear sounds of like actual literal monsters growling, that's just them. Okay. So several people have asked what I thought of this book, and I thought that since I've recommended it several times, I should probably just go ahead and do a review. I'm trying to do like real reviews, right? Instead of just sitting down and, puking out whatever I remember about the book. Which I may have done a time or two. I put some little tabs in here. So, I've got some notes, I've got my coffee, and we'll talk about this book. So, Raven Grimoire is the author of several books. What We Knew in the Night, I also have. I don't remember the other ones. I've read two others by him. I don't remember the other one. I just borrowed it like from a library or something. But this one is by far my favorite. So basically the idea of this book, I sort of break this book down into three parts. In my head, it's not really broken down like that within the text. But the first part of this book is very interesting in that he has done a lot of research into like not witch trial stuff from Europe, but also sort of looking into like folk tales from around the time and things like that. Oh my god, my dog's gonna be walking around this entire time. She literally does not know how to sit down, and I'm sorry if you can hear her click-clacking around too. So it's almost synthesized information from a lot of really old texts for probably the first third of this book. Maybe a little more than the first third. Writings from clergy members and things like that. But also, it's got a healthy dose of skepticism when it comes to that stuff, because those are like witches' enemies writing about what witches did. You know what I mean? So really, how absolutely accurate can it be? Okay, so I think that's a fair point. I'm not saying that I 100% agree with everything that he says in this book, but I do definitely think that there are some good points. So in here, I wanted to read a couple little things out to you here. All right, so I didn't tag this one. All right. In the preface, we've got this book is a departure from the familiar theme of arguing for witchcraft as the survival of an ancient tradition. The system presented in the following chapters is not that of the pacifist adhering to the Wiccan guidelines of the harm none read. What is this book about? Simply stated, it's about old forms of witchcraft traceable through aged European roots. But it is also about the mystical old world and the witches who lived it and live it still. So we're not coming into any sort of Wicca-y kind of shit in here, right? I mean, we could tell talking about the Wiccan read or whatever. I think even if you are Wiccan, this is still a good book to look at. It does refute a lot of the witchcraft is a whole tradition, or, the people that were saying that shit, that it was an unbroken line and all this stuff. Like, we know for a fact that it wasn't. It was cherry-picked from a bunch of older sources and things like that. This book comes right out and says it. If that upsets you, I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. Alright, so this basically operates under the idea that the witchcraft history written by theologians isn't necessarily accurate, and what sort of things maybe were accurate based on what was repeated, if that makes any sense. So you got something tagged here. Alright. It is my view that no official history of witchcraft truly exists. This is because the history presented by the academic community is not the depiction of any real society of people known as witches. Instead, it is the study of non-witches and their views about what they referred to as witchcraft and witches. Academic history in this field is the story of how superstition influenced popular beliefs about imaginary witches and witchcraft, and how theologians further invented ideas about the subject. This is a make-believe witchcraft of fantasy themes and not an ethnographical study of a real culture of people who were witches. If we were to call this history, then I feel we need to note that it is a mythical history at best. So, I do agree, definitely, there's really no way to actually know what witches were doing, right? It's little things hidden all over the place that can give us some clues. So he's got... Oh my god, this is water damage. I spilled water on this book, and I was really upset about it. I mean, we've got quotes from old-ass texts. Here's historian Alan McFarlane we're talking about. There's a bunch of little, like... what do you call it? Where you can go back and it's got the text that it came from. We've got a good, healthy bibliography back here. It's very, very well researched. This is mostly his conclusions, sort of reading it, but he does present a lot of the information to you as well, as the reader. So, also, it's talking about the dominant versus the submerged or subaltern culture, saying that the beliefs of, the mainstream culture at that point and what they thought that the submerged or subaltern culture of witchcraft was doing may have no bearing on what they were really doing, right? There's also, he makes a distinction between mortal and supernatural witches, which I think is really interesting. Supernatural witches being like, they actually fly, they literally turn into goats, you know what I mean, versus real people doing what the church was seeing as witchcraft. It are two very different things, right? It also goes into quite a bit of detail about the Christian devil and how it came to be associated with witches, that witches were making deals with the devil and things like that. It states somewhere in here, I probably should have tagged it, but that, oh my god, my dog will not leave me alone, I'm sorry. That they were attacking witches all up and down Europe, for almost 900 years before someone was like, and they're working with the devil! So, that was just a really interesting thing. It's talking about texts that, things were inserted into, referring to work with the Christian idea of the devil. I think that it's super, super interesting. Absolutely my favorite part of this book by far is this beginning part, where we really dig, I feel, into history and making connections between the things. So yeah, I really, really like that part of it. Here though, I put a little red tag on something that I'm really a fan of. I want to read this little bit to you here. The Inquisitor's Manual, known as the Malleus Maleficarum, gives a description of witchcraft practices that includes robbing men of their genitals. The passage claims that witches sometimes collect male organs in great numbers, as many as 20 or 30 members. These are placed in a bird's nest or closed inside a box, where they come alive and are fed oats and corn. Why do we let this practice die? I mean, honestly, that's not true, right? You can't chop someone's dick off and it comes to life and you feed it oats and corn, right? So that, I mean, obviously that was just some wild fear-mongering shit, but also it's fucking hilarious. Okay, so I think this next one is in... Okay, so the middle sort of section of this book is my least favorite. It's not exactly clear. It doesn't, like, draw a line exactly between the part that's the research historical document sort of stuff, and then this book sort of proposes a form of witchcraft created by the author called Ash, Birch, and Willow, that it's sort of like an example of some ways that modern witches could integrate some of these older practices into a full practice now. But before it really gets into like the Grimoire section at the back of it, it just all of a sudden starts talking about like this weird mythology. Like I don't like it because it's literally very obviously just pulled out of his ass. He's like, and then we call this goddess this, and there's like just some invented fairy realm. I mean, it has bases, like hollow hills and shit, but it's not like, I don't know, man. It came out of nowhere. It just kicked me in the side of the head, and I was like, wait, what? And I reread this. This is my second reading of this book. So it's so irritating how that just kind of came out of nowhere, and like it's just so obvious that this guy just sat down and was like, well, we're gonna need a myth about this. Like, it's just it's so weird. I mean, I guess people can believe whatever they want, but it was just so obviously invented, by this guy, that it was kind of weird. I will say the very well researched beginning and then just that sudden middle situation was just bizarre to me. It's also calling. All right, there is a chapter in here called "Witches as the Plant People" or something like that. Yeah, chapter 4, Witches, the Plant People. So a lot of this is very like herbal based magic. Once you actually get into like the practice sections of it. So there's like specific plants that are usually associated with witches and witchcraft. And he's talking about the poisonous ones, right? And each plant that he has, like, I don't know, 8 or 9 of them. And there are like plant spirit names. And I'm like, did he make these up? Are these real things? He's not really presenting it any differently than the way that he was presenting the information about the older texts. So I started Googling. I could not find anything about any of these plant spirit names. And it got into the unverified personal gnosis, right, of this author. And I feel like there should have been a clearer delineation, because people might be like, well, this is real, this is old, it's just some shit that someone made up in 2012 or whenever this book was written. There's also a thing called a hallow, which is supposedly the collective conscious of the earth, which is like plants, people who have died, the animals, everything. And it's like a metaphorical forest sort of in the middle of like the earth that remembers everything. It keeps right. I mean, I'm imagining like a fucking astral plane or whatever, some fucking library, whatever the fuck they call it in the new age shit. And this hallow is like the place where the upper world and the lower world and like the middle world where humans live meet. There's no information anywhere else about that either, so I'm assuming that's also something that he just made up. I mean, I'm not necessarily against that, it's just kind of weird. I'm not reading these books for people's personal gnosis. I have my own. It's one of those things. As an more experienced witch, it's useless to me, and I feel like for newer people to witchcraft, it's probably pretty confusing. Yeah, it's got no sources cited in that area. Okay, where did I have something here? I don't even remember what this was. Okay, so this is talking now about Ash, Birch, and Willow, which he's got a new Wheel of the Year. Yeah, let me just read this. Okay, the format of Ash, Birch, and Willow is representative of the commonality of European paganism. Therefore, it's not restricted to any specific cultural tradition such as Celtic, Germanic, French, Italian, or Greek. Instead, the tradition reflects the core beliefs and practices of all. In order to reflect the commonality of European pagan concepts from various regions, the tradition uses titles for the goddess, and gods. Okay, so he makes up names like little, I don't even know. There's invocations and things in here for them. Here's the plant section. Okay, so in here, we finally get to the Grimoire part, and there's sort of, here we have some more sources cited and some more legit information. And then there's like, it's almost like a self-initiation rituals, it has interesting information. This is, I don't know. This part of the book to me is just meh because I would literally never use a spell exactly as I found in a book. As a teenager, I probably did, but I would always now, and for years, just look and sort of take ideas, or I like the structure of it, or this was a good touch here. So I read through this part. Ultimately, mostly I skimmed it, just looking for good ideas. Here's some ideas for symbols and shit. He's also got plant spirit sigils, which is kind of an interesting way to approach poisonous plants. It goes over the tools, used within the ash, birch, and willow tradition. I don't know if it's really a tradition. I feel like he may have actually, like, had a coven of it. I'm not sure about that. Alright, so it ends on a super weird note that actually I think really irritates me. Okay. And I don't know why it annoys me when people are just making fucking reaches. The last chapter of this book is not any sort of, like, conclusion to it. It's equating the, like, god of witchcraft, which I guess no one can trace back to anyone specific, with Hermes. And while I'm not saying, oh, that's definitely not true, it's certainly a stretch, some of the things that he was pulling in. And then it literally just ends. There's no, like, okay, thanks for reading. It's just like, that was the end of it. So it's weird. So yeah. The reason that I recommend this book a lot is because I feel like it gives a good firm foundation in probably the first third of it. I personally have no interest in that little middle part of it, and I just pillage, whatever I want from the last part of it. The circle casting, it's even one of those traditions where they set up an altar in a specific way, with certain colored candles, it's certain, directions. I know that Wicca does that. I know there are different traditions that do that. I personally am not about that. But I definitely think there's a lot of useful information in this book. You may have noticed it's not exactly the juiciest reading material. It's a little bit dry, but I've certainly read worse. So yeah, I think that this is a pretty good book, honestly, for anyone, any point in their path. I mean, unless you've already done extensive research into witch trial records and shit. I feel like it's good for more experienced witches that may not have all of this information. I feel like it would be good for beginner witches, just really trying to kind of get to the bottom of it all. But like I said, I feel like it's confusing in the middle where all of a sudden it turns into just some shit that he made up rather than having any historical basis. But I do think there's calls to the god and goddess and whatever their names are in here. There's I don't know, dark moon working, a full moon working. There's even a couple things like 4 covens. But for the most part, it's for solitary stuff. So I do think that it's really interesting. I feel like it's a good, again, even the Grimoire at the back is a pretty good foundation. Personally, I would not recommend following everything in here exactly because these are spiritual things that he has gained and not necessarily the reader of the book. I don't know, man. I was kind of disappointed, I guess, in the last 2/3 of this because the first part was so good in this. So honestly, if you can find a used copy of this for a couple bucks, if you can borrow it from a library or a friend or something, I would recommend doing it just because the history of it, I just think is really good. I think it's fascinating. I've read this through twice, and the beginning part of this was just as fascinating to me the second time as it was the first. Like, it is just packed with good information. So yeah, I do recommend this book. I do think that there's a little warning in there that, notice where he stops citing sources, so that you're not left thinking that some of this stuff is, like, actually an old-ass practice, right? So, yeah, that was my review. I mean, I don't know. I'd probably give it a 4 out of 5 stars, if I had to give it, like, a star rating. Um, I mean, the beginning part is definitely 5 out of 5. I took a star off because, the middle part annoys me. Yeah. So, that was my review of this book, and, if you've read it, or if you want to read it, let me know in the comments, what you thought. Thanks for watching, bye.